In 1944, as Allied forces pushed into Nazi-occupied Europe, Hitler's spies reported a massive American armored division near the German front. Dozens of tanks, thousands of troops, full movement, ready to attack. But it was all fake. The tanks, inflatable rubber, the soldiers, actors and radio techs, the weapons, loudspeakers and paint. It was one of the most brilliant deceptions in modern military history, and it stayed classified for 50 years. This is not the story of generals. This is the story of designers, illustrators, sound engineers, and fashion students who helped win a war without ever firing a bullet. This is the untold story of the Ghost Army. In 1943, the U.S. Army formed a top-secret unit unlike any before. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. It had over 1,100 men, but they weren't just soldiers. They were Broadway set designers, sound engineers from Hollywood, painters from the Art Institute of Chicago, fashion students from New York. The military had one mission for them: deceive the enemy, confuse their scouts, trick their generals, make the Germans think we're everywhere, even when we're not. Their tools, inflatable tanks, camouflage nets and fake patches, 500-pound loudspeakers blasting pre-recorded combat radio operators who mimicked entire units with fake chatter. This wasn't espionage, it was theater. The Ghost Army trained at Camp Forest, Tennessee, under a veil of secrecy. They were taught how to move silently, how to lay out decoys, and how to think like stage designers, not soldiers. Many of them had no idea where they were going. They only knew one thing: they were about to go to war with paint, rubber, and sound. June 1944. D-Day. The Allies stormed Normandy. Behind the beach landings, as chaos spread across France, the Ghost Army arrived in silence. Their first operation? Operation Brest. They had to convince German intelligence that a full division was preparing to attack a city that had no attacking troops. Here's how they did it. They inflated 30-ton tanks in open fields, made entirely of rubber. They played hours of engine sounds and marching soldiers through hidden speakers. They painted fake tire tracks and mud prints to suggest tank movement. They wore phony unit patches to confuse enemy scouts. German planes flew overhead. They took photos. They reported a large, real American force. It was all an illusion. The Ghost Army drew German artillery fire away from the real units. They saved lives by pretending to be someone else. One of the Ghost Army's greatest weapons wasn't a tank or a gun. It was sound. Hollywood audio engineers designed massive sound systems mounted on trucks that could project audio over 15 miles. They recorded convoys moving tanks, idling shovels, digging troops marching, hammering, coughing, joking, snoring. They had a library of war sounds ready to deploy anywhere. Each performance was tailored to terrain: forest, muffled sounds with echo urban ruins, metallic clanking and boots, rocky hills. Bounced echo-layered movement, they'd arrive in the dead of night, set up inflatable tanks, pump in fake chatter, and blast a phony army through the trees. Sometimes they even left leaflets or painted graffiti to add realism. They also had expert radio operators who could mimic entire battalions by copying signal habits, using authentic call signs and chatter styles. It was like watching a live-action movie, except the enemy couldn't tell it wasn't real. In March 1945, just weeks before Germany's surrender, the Ghost Army pulled off its boldest move yet. Operation Viersen. The goal: make the Germans believe the Ninth Army was preparing to cross the Rhine at a specific point, when in fact, the real crossing would happen 30 miles away. What the Ghost Army did: set up inflatable artillery, tanks, and command tents, deployed fake generals and military police, blared constant construction sounds of fake bridges, drove loops of empty trucks to simulate supply lines, and used spoof radio to impersonate command networks. To any aerial observer, it was a full-scale military staging area. The Germans repositioned their defenses. The real Allied crossing faced significantly less resistance. Thousands of lives were saved, and still no one knew. The Ghost Army faded into the trees. When the guns fell silent in Europe and the Allies declared victory, most American units returned home to fanfare, medals, parades, the embrace of a grateful nation. But not the Ghost Army. Their records were locked away, their stories buried in government vaults. And for over 50 years, the world had no idea they even existed. There were no awards, no public thanks, no confirmation the unit had ever served at all. Because the truth was, the Ghost Army wasn't just a battlefield experiment. It was a classified military deception program, one of the most successful ever conducted. Between 1944 and 1945, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops executed over 20 large-scale deception operations across France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Germany. In many cases, they were operating within a few hundred yards of enemy lines, using nothing more than sound, light, and art to fool Nazi intelligence. Their missions required nerves of steel. They slept in camouflage nets under fake tanks. They risked discovery daily. If caught, they'd be executed as spies. And yet, they carried no real weapons. Their orders were to not engage, only to deceive. But what made the Ghost Army so extraordinary wasn't just their tactics. It was who they were. Bill Blass would go on to become a world-renowned fashion designer, dressing celebrities and presidents. Ellsworth Kelly would become one of America's greatest abstract painters, with works hanging in the Smithsonian and the MoMA. Arthur Singer would gain fame as a wildlife illustrator, bringing birds and nature into the homes of millions. Jack Macy, a set designer in the unit, would later help design exhibits for the U.S. Pavilion at World Expos. These were not just anonymous artists. They were the quiet visionaries of 20th century American culture. And they had served their country with brushes, rubber, and brilliance. It wasn't until 1996, after decades of secrecy, that the U.S. military finally declassified the records of the Ghost Army. By then, many veterans had already passed. Their stories were never told. Their families never knew the full truth of what they had done. Survivors came forward, quietly, humbly. Some had journals, others had sketches, some still had patches from the fake divisions they had created. It stunned historians. Military scholars realized that the Ghost Army's success had directly influenced later deception units, including those used in Korea, Vietnam, and even Gulf War psychological operations. But more than that, it forced the world to rethink what courage looks like in warfare. What they left behind. The Ghost Army left behind no battlefield memorials, no statues, no graves marked with their true legacy. But they did leave behind something else. A new understanding of warfare as performance, a redefinition of creativity as a weapon, and a reminder that sometimes the most heroic acts leave no mark at all. These men saved thousands of lives. They diverted fire from real soldiers. They shortened battles before they began. And they did it not with firepower, but with imagination. One Ghost Army veteran later said, "We didn't kill anyone, but we may have saved lives. That was our weapon, illusion." They say war is hell, but sometimes war is also art. The Ghost Army didn't kill, they didn't conquer, but they may have saved tens of thousands of lives by convincing the enemy they were bigger, stronger, and everywhere. They fought with sound, with rubber and light, with brushstrokes and illusion. They were not warriors, they were artists. And for a brief moment in history, they became the greatest illusionists the world has ever known. This was the story of the Ghost Army. And this is Untold History.